Hi, Priya. It's so good to see you.
Hey Nina, happy Thursday.
Yeah, here we are on our my first LinkedIn Live. I am so glad, so grateful that you had time today to have this conversation with me and with some other folks who are coming in.
Me too, thank you. I'm always happy to talk to you. I love it.
Yeah. So I want to dive right in because people can go and listen to our longer conversation. But one of the things that came out of the conversation for me is how do we I I see people kind of doing what we often do, which is we put DEI or JEDI, which is the term justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion that you're using in your work with leaders and teams. We put it in a its own lane instead of saying, no, this is essential as a leadership skill. So, or as a competency, a set of competencies. So, like, what do you see as being essential about JEDI for leaders?
So I think one of the assumptions under that statement is that it's not separate, or we don't think of it as being separate. If you're going to be a good leader, then you're going to have to be certain things, one of them being inclusive. You're going to have to be a good communicator. You're right. You're going to have to be persuasive. You're going to have to be influential. You're going to have to be inclusive. So it doesn't weigh any more or less um, in the rubric of leadership, but I think every leader gets to decide how much that matters for themselves.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. Like, if you want to be an effective leader, it means being an inclusive leader.
Well, I'm already loving that you're making this point about let's not choose this from our saboteur, but choose it from your values and like what is important to me about being an inclusive leader versus, oh, I need to do this because if I don't, X, Y, or Z will happen, right? That fear based place.
Yeah. As you know, leadership is an adaptive challenge, which means there's no playbook
Mm,
on what it takes to be a fantastic leader. That means that each of us have to adapt to understanding, like you said, our values and the situation and our conditions and circumstances, beliefs, everything, and find the or write our own playbook for what is good leadership and what is effective leadership. We may all have role models in our lives that we can take from. So I often tell my clients to think about a hero list. Who are 10 people in your life, 10 people in your life,
mm,
fictional, non-fictional, whatever, and write out 5 to 7 qualities of each one.
mm,
And you get to be the combination of those. And they're your
beautiful.
hero for a reason, right? Something
Yeah.
about them resonated for you. And all of those qualities are inside you. You get to be the combination of those.
Oh, that's lovely. And it feels more intuitive and more kind of holistic to come up with those avatars, if you will, and then to apply them to you personally. Do you have like what's one or two of your biggest role models for leadership?
I love to ask this question, and thank you for asking me, because every time I ask a client, I'm forced and then when they go through their list, I'm like, oh yeah, me too. Like, I know that person, or the qualities resonate with me. But
Yeah.
certainly my mom and dad, I put them on. My sister, I put them on there. Um, the kindness, the honesty, the generosity that I was raised with, the care that's like the part of the kind of leadership I aspire to. And to me, those are very much aligned with the purposes of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love that. And I was going to ask you what the qualities are, but you're so good. You just knew right away to do that. We were talking as we prepped for this and and I asked you a question and you had such a great answer and so immediate and it was I think if I can get the question right it was like well how do we measure like how do we break down a competency especially one as complex as DEI and so let's just start with inclusion like how would you break down inclusion for a leader to have them know that they were on track or that they had something to aspire to in terms of inclusion.
Yeah. So I think the first thing to recognize is it's a way of being. But I will tell you, Nina, like 9 out of 10 of my clients are going to be like, what the heck does that mean?
Mm.
So you can think of it in a couple of ways. One is, what are the key behaviors? Second is, what are the mindsets? And third, what is the identity? So each one is its own compartment of that kind of leadership, or that competency, as you called it. So let's take key behaviors, for example. What are the key behaviors of an inclusive leader? It's the way, like very granularly, that how do they listen to people? How do they ask questions? Are they asking open-ended, curious questions that invite reflection, exploration, a range and a broadening range of perspectives? Those are some key behaviors, right? Do you share your process with others and invite them to share their process? Are you inviting? Are you welcoming? Those are key behaviors.
Yeah.
Mindsets are things like, like the way for me to really make this a mechanical thing is, when you wake up in the morning, who do you want to be? What kind of person do you want to be that morning? And maybe some days you wake up and say, today I'm going to be productive. Okay, cool.
Right.
That means for the rest of the day, your brain is naturally going to seek opportunities for you to be productive. But imagine waking up in the morning and saying, I want to be just, or I want to be inclusive. Today I'm going to be inclusive. And your
Yeah.
brain, again, is going to look for opportunities for you to be that way.
I
Okay.
love that. We do a lot of intention setting and coaching, but the way you're breaking it down feels very practical and less woo-woo.
Thanks. Maybe that's
You're
my
welcome.
own mindset. Today I'm going to be practical is like part of how I woke up this morning, right? To say, okay, let's break this
Yes.
down. How do you make this really kind of mechanical? And what do I need to do? So actually, like at our institute, we asked a lot of people, like, what is an allyship mindset? You wake up in the morning and you look at yourself in the mirror. What's a commitment you're making to who you want to be? And people said things like, I'm going to take one risk today. I'm going to be a risk
Nice.
taker,
Yeah.
or I'm going to learn one new thing, or I'm going to discover something new.
Yeah.
Imagine what it would be like for you to intentionally wake up in the morning and
Yeah.
make a commitment like that.
That's so great. And I just want to give a shout out to people who are here and listening and just say, we're so glad you're here. If I knew more about LinkedIn Lives, I would be, asking you to comment and I'd be reading those out loud. But since we're pretty new to this, I just want you to know that we see you, we appreciate you, and we will have the recording available for those who aren't here. I want to take a step back because before we talk about identity, because that's the third piece that we haven't talked about yet, I also heard something when you were talking about key behaviors. And I'm just wondering how much you break it down with the leaders you work with. Because to say, I want to be welcoming, that also sounds like an intention. But I remember I had a leader I was working with in tech who was really strong and popular and knew how to make people feel welcome in a way, but she could also be a bit stern. She was an Enneagram 1, so she had a real commitment to excellence. Sometimes it came out as perfectionism, right? And so the behavior we were working on with her was to smile more when she was in a meeting, because she would get this kind of default frowny face about whatever was happening. And so it seems like a really granular thing to do. And of course, we want people to be authentically themselves, but it was really helpful for her, and more granular than say, okay, be welcoming. No, actually smile in the conversation, smile, make an intention to smile more and see how that goes for you. And it's always an experiment, right? So are
Totally.
you that granular when you're talking with people about
Yeah,
inclusion?
absolutely. So I think, first of all, mindset and behavior are very much intertwined, like you said. In fact, the smile leads to a mindset. Typically, we know our
Mm.
physiology, as most of us, our first access point. So imagine if I asked you, Nina, to, like, you don't have to do this, but like stand up, throw your arms up in your air, put a big
I am
smile on your
standing. I'm
face.
really short, but I am standing.
Imagine I asked you to do that, like with that same facial expression you're showing me right now, and said, keep it, freeze, but now get angry.
Oh,
You wouldn't be able to do it because your
mm-mm.
physiology is your first access point. So, and the behavior of that, of what you're doing in your body, leads to your mindset. So they are, the first point is that mindset and behavior very much is aligned. Once
Mm.
you have your mindset too, you can orient your behavior accordingly too. So when we talk about listening, we really break it down into what is inclusive listening. How is it different from, in the Coaches Training Institute, we talk about things like level 1 listening or level 2 listening. Well, what is inclusive listening?
Yeah.
It's like an even different way to listen.
Yeah.
And how do you ask questions? Well, there's a billion ways that you can ask questions. It turns out an inclusive question has a certain impact, which is to
Mm.
include, to create a courageous and safe place for people to be who they are and to feel as though this is a place where I belong, where I can be myself and say what I need to say.
Oh, I really appreciate how these are connected. And oh, so let's connect the dots and bring in identity. So how does identity fit in with a competency and shaping, especially in a competency around inclusion?
So, again, very much tied to mindset and behavior, but I think of it as the most defining quality. So,
Mm.
if you think about it, anytime you say the words I am, and then you complete that sentence, you're defining who you are. Even
Yeah.
if it's I am hungry, you're going to go ahead and be congruent with that definition of yourself. You're going to complete it. You're going to try to be authentic with it. Okay. So imagine, when I say I am a mom, that means something to me.
Yes.
I can own it and I know exactly what it means to me. And it is how I present myself to the world, along with a lot of other identities I have, including I am a leader, I am a coach, I am a friend, I'm a sister, etc. So, one
Mm.
of the things about JEDI leadership or JEDI coaching is recognizing, whether you like it or not, that you are a leader and to sort of almost look at yourself in the mirror and say, I am a leader. What does that mean to me? What are the qualities that go along with that? If you want to make it even more specific, say, I am a inclusive leader, or I'm a transformational leader, I'm an inspiring leader. That will
Yes.
give you more qualities to draw from, right? The idea is to have some range and agility in your leadership competencies, to not just be
That's
one way of leading.
Yeah, yeah, and even James Clear talks about this, and probably is borrowing from a lot of other folks, but about the importance of identity in building new habits. So I can see how that identity shift helps you form those new habits or those new behaviors that you're also wanting as an inclusive leader.
Yeah,
So
yeah. We One of the things we've discovered also in our research is that on the allyship journey, and Jennifer Brown's done a really nice job on the allyship continuum, and we've taken it just a smidge further to say, like, okay, now you can identify with these. You get to define your identity as an ally or as an inclusive leader. And it starts with, like, I am learning, and it goes all the
yes.
way to I am committed and
Hmm.
or I am decided. Like, I am a decided inclusive leader. For
Yeah,
me personally, that means I'm going to make a ton of mistakes. It's going to be easy sometimes, it's going to be hard sometimes, and I'm on this journey. I've decided that.
yeah,
Often the thing that prevents people from being who they want to be is a simple decision. And
right.
so our last stage in our model is I am decided.
Oh, that's so lovely. And you and I already talked about this a little bit, but I think that is the biggest stumbling block for many folks, especially when you're coming from probably more often when you're coming from a place of privilege, right? Where you're carrying this, for me, like even a little bit of embarrassment around the places where I have, this unearned advantage. And so it's not always okay with me to make mistakes
Mhm.
because it's disruptive somehow to my identity. And so, like, it's really important for me. The learner mindset and the learner identity helps me make mistakes more and gives
Love
me
it.
grace. But the commitment does sound. I think I make commitments more easily sometimes than I give myself grace. So maybe that's why I need a little bit of a
Yeah.
connection to the learning mindset when I'm committed.
Yeah, I think you've just nailed it. It's not a linear process, is it? We
No.
might just hit upon one identity and realize we need to be, this identity needs to be insulated with my learning identity so that I can actually be both.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're halfway through time. This time is flying just like it did in the episode we did together for my podcast. What do you want folks to know about your upcoming Jedi coaching program, if that's not too broad of a question?
Well, thanks for asking. Yeah, we have a JEDI, we have the JEDI for Leaders program and we have
Yes.
JEDI for Coaches. So the JEDI for
Yes.
Coaches program is really for professional coaches and counselors. And we just heard so many coaches and counselors saying, I love being a coach. How do I take my coaching to the next level? And by the way, it's becoming really important to me to learn how to be inclusive in my coaching practice because I'm seeing a more diverse range of clients. And I love that people are thinking about it. And there's
Yeah.
many schools who are like starting to discover what it means to bring inclusion into your coaching practice. So what we do first is it's a 6-part workshop series that you can get your ICF credits for if you take the course.
Go.
But it starts with some assumptions we make in most coach training schools. Assumptions like the coaching assumption of neutrality. And actually, we look at the word neutrality in the context of social justice, which is like you can't really be neutral in the face of injustice. What does
Right.
it mean when your client comes to you with an injustice? Are you really going to take on that mantle of neutrality? And what does it mean if you do? What does it mean if you take sides? And when do you take sides or not? And do you keep it to yourself or do you share it? We talk about the coaching agenda. Who defines it? How does it get defined? And what are the power dynamics under which the coaching agenda is defined? The way that I was taught to coach was that the client has an agenda, but that I also have an agenda, which is to amplify their agenda. But it's sort of like, well, where does the power come from in defining and naming that agenda and sharing it? So in the first one, we just talk about some of those basic assumptions. The second one, we talk all about identity. What is your identity as a coach? What type of coach are you? How do you talk about identity with your client? If you are talking about things like values with your client, core beliefs, underlying beliefs, goals, then talking about identity is the same. It's not the same way. But if you're talking about values, but you're not talking about identity, you're doing yourself and your coach client and frankly your practice a disservice.
Yeah.
That idea of identity, but not just like who am I, but also your social identities and how they play out, how they're playing out in our dynamic here, and how they might be playing out at work. So we
Very
give you like
cool.
language on how to talk about it, how to broach the topic. We have many um, client or coaches who've gone through this program who self-identify with privileged identities. Okay, well, how much, and people will say, how do I bring it up? The fact that you are an Indian woman, am I just feeding into the stereotypes of bringing that up? It does take an enormous amount of courage to have the conversation about social identity and how it plays out.
Yeah.
You rest on curiosity and those key behaviors and mindsets and create that courageous space. You're modeling for your client what courage looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. It strikes me, even though I'm curious about the other sessions, but I also know people can find out about them online. I think one of the things I'm dwelling on right now is how to bring up inclusion with a leader who doesn't have it on their radar. I
Yeah,
know it would improve who they are being at work and what they're doing. And like you said, it's not necessarily their agenda.
it's not
And
their
I
agenda.
want to be bolder about that. So I don't know if you have any tips for me
Yeah.
right now, other than for me to set that intention and to make it as part of my foundation work. But I'm just kind of curious what you do when you're working with a leader and they haven't mentioned inclusion as something that's important to them.
Most don't
Yeah.
mention it.
Yeah.
And if they do, that's all they want to talk about.
Yes.
And so there's that extreme too. So we're doing holistic coaching here.
Yeah.
I don't brand myself as an inclusive coach. I brand myself as a leadership coach. Okay. Which means that we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff that is personal and professional. And we're going to make it all messy and hopefully you'll get some insight out of this. So that
Yeah.
means we're going to go to some territories that you may not have ever thought about and some other areas where you know yourself really, really well. The point of our work is to help you see yourself so that you can be your full self and give yourself to the world and to yourself in a way that serves people for your personal mission, whatever that
Hmm.
may
Oh my
be.
gosh, can I just like bottle you up and bring you to my foundation sessions? Okay, I'm gonna hit record. I'm gonna hit record right here, or the play button. You say, I mean, seriously, you're so articulate. I mean, I consider myself to be articulate, but
You
you're beautiful.
Oh, thank you. That feels
Yeah.
nice.
Hmm.
But I do this, and I've seen you do this too, when you're like
Hmm.
talking about the thing that is so resonant for you, it just comes out without you really
Yeah.
thinking about it.
Yeah.
And this feels like that, especially coaches wanting to be bold and wanting to push their clients and give them an experience beyond what they bargained for or expected, which means you talk about those things that are harder to talk about, but that are so rich, including
Yeah.
social identity and power and all the other beautiful things that we talk about, values and
Hmm.
perspectives.
Well, the other thing I want to underline as I reflect on how you approach the conversation is kind of what I'm wanting for myself too, which is I'm coming from a place of authority, but also a place of this is important to me as a coach. And so I want you to know that so that we can either include it or design with it, or at least I'm not leaving it at the door. Like I'm not leaving it behind because I haven't heard you mention it specifically. And I think that is where the better we get at coaching, the more we can bring this balance between, yes, the client's got an agenda, but we also have expertise in leadership development and inclusion and teams. And so we want to be able to bring that to our clients.
Totally. And whether you know it or not, your client's giving you that power,
Yeah,
right?
it's true.
And what you're doing also is when you say a statement like that and wait for the reaction and are accepting of any response from your client, you are modeling that behavior as a leadership behavior. Like, hey, I'm telling you what's important to me.
Hmm.
What do you think, partner? Right? We're in this together.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it feels like a good place to kind of hit the pause button on this amazing conversation. And we just want people to know that where they can find you and where they can find the show. So, where would you send people if they wanted to learn more, Priya?
So they can go to our website,
Yeah.
theroundtableinstitute.com, and there's a tab there for courses that they can sign up for.
Cool.
That's probably the best way. They can also contact me directly and connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy
Good.
to connect with people and speak personally. I'm pretty good about writing back to people who write to me, unless they're trying to sell me something that I don't need. Um,
Right.
but most of the time, I'm very happy to have conversations with folks on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really loved how focused this LinkedIn was. And if people want a kind of a more casual, little rambling, but also insightful conversation, they can go and listen to our episode that we just did together.
Thank you, Nina.
You're so welcome. Thank you for being with me on this new journey of LinkedIn Live.
Yeah, I learned something new too. This is cool.
And I know people are going to enjoy linking with you, and you also, or at least following you, because you do some wonderful posts as well here on LinkedIn.
Thanks so much.